Hi, I'm Seamless, and whatever today's day is, it's time for the making of the virtual Riot We Are Not Alone remix that I did. This is part one, where I'm going to go over the elements and arrangement. What I mean by that, I'm essentially going to go through each part and break down precisely what's what, like what is creating what sound, and how I decided to write the way I did, and that kind of business. Parts 2 and 3 are going to be sound design and mixing and mastering, respectively. Also, a bit of a change to things is if you're watching this on YouTube, you might not necessarily know this, but I'm actually streaming live right now. What's going to end up happening is that once I'm done doing what would normally have been the entire tutorial, I'm also going to take questions from the chat, the live chat. So when I say that if anyone has any questions they can ask me, they're actually going to right then and there, and then I'm going to address them and talk a bit about that kind of thing. In the future, if you want to be part of this sort of deal, my Twitch link, because I'm on Twitch, is in the description of this video and every single video that I have. And, well, newer ones anyway. I haven't actually changed the old ones because the old ones still say Ustream. But, yeah, that's a lot of work to do that. Anyway, that's what's happening. So let's do this. In the beginning, there was an intro. Now, the first thing you might notice here is a crap ton of automation. Now, what a lot of this automation is actually doing is screwing around with a gross beat for this guy. Yeah. There's a lot more other things happening there, but like pretty much all of this, like I guess that's not doing that. Like this, that, and these are all controlling gross beat parameters, and largely in a random way. Like I kind of just put them there so that it would just kind of chop it up and do random sounding things. So what's really all I wanted to do. This one is controlling the time slot position. This one's controlling the volume slot position. This one's controlling the time mix, and this one's controlling the wet dry mix. You might be thinking, why am I doing both of these? But that's because the time mix is one thing, but then also the volume mix is another. The volume mix is pretty much on forever. The very first thing that we hear is a combination of the kick, which is this pattern right there. I think it is. No, that's an automation clip. Where's the pattern? I guess I don't actually have a kick. I'm just doing this. Bam. I might have seen that because of my camera. Yeah, so this is, you can see what it says. It's Lev Impact Flatline. That's from the Leviathan pack from Black Octopus. It's full of great stuff like this. I love these impact kind of hits and stuff or whatever. It's a good time. This is one of the stems for the remix. This is actually something I want to stress about the arrangement of all this, is that this didn't take me a huge amount of time to do, but that's because I basically started already halfway done. This is a remix. I used the stems, and there were a lot of them. This wasn't just a remix competition where the guy gave you the vocals and kind of told you to run with it. He gave you pretty much everything. They gave you the basses, the chords. I don't think he gave you the drums, but I don't really remember about that. Honestly, I just used the not bass and not drums because all the drums and basses are in here are mine. But everything else, like this guy and like the chords and the vocals, those are all from the original pack. It's also worth noting that this project is at 174, and these stems are all originally at 140. So I just changed them to be 174, and there really isn't the way to do that in FL where you just tell it to be 174. I essentially looked at how many bars each of the things were, and then when I changed to 174, I stretched them to be that bar length so that they were the correct, just rigidly grid correct. The other thing we're hearing is this guy. Now what this guy is actually a Harmor channel. This is one of the stems that I actually dropped into Harmor and then slowed down a whole bunch. But and as well as slowing it down, I also put a volume loop on it here. This is important to note because the original, which I think is this guy, Yeah, this is the original. Yes, I think that was the original. One of those samples with the original. But what's interesting about these samples is that given that this is virtual Riot, I wouldn't be surprised. He may have played them like manually with a keyboard. And I say that because it isn't, well, it's kind of hard to tell right now. It isn't 100% perfectly on the grid. And it might have been because I screwed up the time stretching, but I don't think that's the case, because it would have been more obvious that was the case. But when I slowed it down a lot, it became really obvious that the hits were not necessarily 100% on, which is why I did that volume loop thing. So it doesn't really matter where the hits are hitting. We're still getting the rhythm kind of superimposed on top of that. So that was this guy. Let's see what else is happening. We have a hat pattern here. I've got a lot of stuff going on in terms of mixing, whatever. But I have this automation clip here is a band pass. That's or is it a high pass? I forget. It's a band pass, and I'm just going up and down the hats just to make it sound cool. And this is also the first time that we hear the vocals. That big old paddy sounding thing that we're hearing is actually part of the reverb that's coming from the on top of the vocals. I'll explain what that is in the sound design portion of these videos. Much like the rest of the stems, I changed the vocals tempo just to be 174. I didn't really edit them beyond that. I didn't change any of the inflections. I didn't change any of the weighting or the notes or anything. I just changed the tempo. So keep your head high. I did kind of screw with some things just because how fast that she said certain things and what kind of beat she did worked very well for the 140 of the original track, but some of them didn't really translate very well into 174. But it translated well enough that I kind of just left them the way they were. Largely speaking, that's more or less what's happening in here. And then we have the addition of this dude. This is the original sample here, except this is the first half. There's two halves to this stem. There's this. And there's that. There's actually two halves. This is actually half of what this half even is. It's the second half. But I kept this half because of the timing issues that were present that I mentioned before. I wanted to be consistent. There's some growing going on in this stem in the first half and the second half, and I just wanted this to be underneath everything while I was doing it. So I kept it just to be the one that's consistent and repetitious. And I believe that's the fill. That's the part of the chord stem, and then at the very end of that was also where the fill lives, which is present during a lot of the songs in general. So fade into the volume, and then here we have a noise riser from Leviathan. Leviathan has a lot of very nice sort of utility risers that are built out of like white noise and regular things like that. So it's pretty cool. And it's a lot easier than just me making white noise. I don't really like using white noise, but I use it for very specific things like risers, and it's pretty good for that kind of stuff. So, funny thing about making this track is that I originally kind of started working on this as sort of a joke. Like, I saw that he had put up the stems, and I thought, like, I like his music. I like Virtual Riot's music a lot, but it's not my style of music. It's not something that I really like doing. But I heard it, I was just kind of like, stems. Okay, let's see what I can do with that. And I decided, you know what? Just to kind of throw everyone for a loop, I'm going to make a liquid drum and bass track. And, like, this was going to be entirely what the song was. Like, that's all this was going to be. But, like, I couldn't help myself, and I went and made a drop anyway. Like, that's usually what happens when I get in those kinds of moods. When I'm just like, oh, I don't know, I'll make a deep house track, and then I end up making an electro house track. Or I'm like, oh, no, I'll make a liquid drum and bass track, and I end up making drum step. That's just kind of what happens. But I did kind of do the liquid thing anyway. So we have this ambient stem going on up here. This is just sort of stuff happening. Like it's this I think is the whole stem. Yeah, this is the whole stem, and then I cut it up to repeat and the sound right and that kind of deal. I have two primary sounds going on in the basses. There's this guy, which is actually being controlled by this automation clip here. There's not really a lot going on in that sound. I just wanted to have something sharp to layer over this guy. Yeah. And here's the return of this from earlier. This is the affected version of this stem, so that they're layering together is kind of interesting. It kind of helps so that the progression is essentially just a slower version of the lead, which is kind of fun that way. And then we have the drums. Now I approached this kind of listening to a lot of like liquidy based tracks, mostly pendulum stuff, because that's sort of what I grew up listening to. And so my idea of what I needed to have in like the drums were a kind of acoustic-y but still forceful sounding kick. So I built it out of 3 separate samples. And the snare is still kind of hard stuff, but it's got also an acoustic edge, because like old school drum and bass is very much based on old funk breaks. Like that's kind of what the sound is supposed to be. And like the good drum and bass is still based on that, but it's a little bit more techy. You know what I mean? The modern drum and bass is certainly very techy, but like the transition between old school drum and bass into liquid into the Neuro stuff, that's the real deal. It's still based around the acoustic kit, just reinforced with the techy sounding stuff. So that was sort of the angle that I went with here. And that's the drums. Don't worry about how I got it to sound like this or whatever. It's all going to get explained in the mixing video. Now the samples, because everyone always asks me this when they see these. The samples that I'm using are from the Break Tweaker pack. That is to say, it's the pack of samples that comes with the plugin Break Tweaker made by Isotope. I have the pack because I have Break Tweaker. And I have Break Tweaker because I actually made some sounds for Break Tweaker. There's some sounds in that pack that are mine. But the real winners in them are all of the BT samples, which, and now I just realized that I'm not totally sure if they're called BT because they're from BT's sample library or if it's because it's the Break Tweaker library. But there are also AU5 samples, which I love dearly because he's really good at that stuff. And yeah, so for everyone who's constantly asking me all that kind of stuff, that's what's fun. I'm going to keep saying that every time because everyone always asks. It's kind of like the old days when everyone would ask me how I cut the loop in the recording Edison every single time. All the stuff going on down here is mostly like the Maximus stuff and some filtering, whatever. Like these filters, like this is actually filtering the main dude here. A lot of these are kind of like getting stuff ready to be used in the later bits. Like, I don't think this is actually doing anything until this happens here. And this is switching between this guy. I think there's another one over here, and should be one more somewhere else. This switches between the two different Maximuses I have on the master, one for the hard stuff and one for the not so hard stuff. This is considered hard stuff right now. Keep your head high, looking at the night sky, and now we're not alone at all. So this is still the same thing, except now that it has vocals. The way they did vocals is I have this one dry track, keep your head high, which has all kinds of filters and crap on it because of the automation clips. And then I have this one track that is specifically on a very reverby track. And the point of that is a kind of accent, you know, the accenty moments, so that like, because I could have just put a reverb on the entire thing, but that would get very messy. And I wanted to really only spread certain certain moments of particular words. So that's what I ended up doing.
Keep your head high, looking at the night sky, and now we're not alone at all.
So that's what this sort of secondary business is. So this there's a lot going on here. This is essentially the break rise, this part here. Arrangement wise, this intro didn't really make a whole lot of sense because, like I said, this was supposed to be the main point. This was essentially already the track going at this point, but I, eventually failed that idea. So this is essentially still an intro. Like, this is like an intro. This is like an actual intro, and then we have the rise that goes into the drop. This is the break rise. So we still have the ambience bit, glocky sounding thing coming from up top, and there's a filter up here. What is this filtering? Enter 20. It's probably not even enter 20 anymore. That's the vocals. Oh no, it's the bass. Okay, so this is filtering the main bass. Enter 53. What is that? Gotta do some archaeology here. Okay, this was a falling business. What did I use that on? Wasn't this guy, it was this guy. Yeah, okay. This is just some synthy thing that I thought sounded pretty cool to just throw in there. It's a style of sound effect that's pretty common for the more modern, liquidy kind of poppy drum and bass style. This reverb is for insert 30. What is that? I think this is the chords. Yeah, so I have this really intense reverb on this dude, and this is actually, you can see, this is the drop second half synths for the for the actual original track. I decided to use that as an intro because it spaced out pretty good. I didn't do any edits to it at all except to make it 174. We got the flat line kind of in there again. Here's some kicks to give us accents. And these are from the wet vocal pack because there was a dry vocal pack and a wet vocal track, and this has like a reverb and delay and whatever on it. And it is actually a lot easier to work with reverb and delay tails when they're in audio form. I tend to be kind of lazy, so I just keep them live. But I decided that to have like a little bit of business working on just for that accent, just that was already done, so that worked out pretty good for me. And then we have a lot of EQs and stuff that are doing specific things. Here's again the Maximus that's switching over. Here's the effect I mentioned earlier. This is actually an actual rise. And here's the note, and here's a big old slide note. And it's actually muted. I think this is actually this is the modulator X window, and then one of these is the volume. That's this guy. Enter 50. That makes sense. Yeah. So this is a pretty standard FM riser. The sound design portion is going to go over what that is. This is the bass, the main bass that's being filtered. One of these is the sharper sounding one that was from over here originally, and here's the filter for that. They're both the same note. They both follow the same note, so I don't really pay attention much to that. On those chords, if I didn't fully explain what this is, on these chords down here, I have the really big reverb, and then I just kind of filter in the reverb, leading into the next hit. And now we're finally coming to the dorp. With some reverse vocals leading into this. Whoa, that was a funky visual bug. And a lot of stuff cuts out. At least tries to. Some of it doesn't. But most of the time, this works out. This is another white noise based kind of riser deal that I layered over the FM riser that I created here. Again from Leviathan. Okay, so there's a lot of crap happening here. This is actually one of the first things, well, first actual like real thing that I did that I used Serum for. That's what these two guys are. This dude. And this dude. I layered them together just to make some cool sounding bass deal. It might sound a little weird by itself. That's because it's not being sidechained by the drums. Makes a little more sense when everything else is on. Now, as for the main chords, I didn't make any of them. They're from the original song. Except that guy that was Time Stretch. That's the original song, and I just cut it. And I also played to what the original rhythm was. I just added my own kind of angle to it. What am I doing down here? What is that? Oh yeah, so that's the bass. I layered it underneath it, kind of give it angle. This is that business going on beneath that. I do cut it. That's what this guy is. It's cutting this guy so that in the midst of when this bass plays, it's really the only audible thing. It's to give extra sharpness to what's going on down there. Oh yeah, there's this. Okay, so this is a decision I made pretty late in I actually made everything until I was almost done, and I decided to add this in. And what this is, we just listen to this by itself. I decided the chords needed some extra sort of width and like reinforcement to them. So what I did was I actually put this into an Edison. This is actually the original chord stem into an Edison, and I blurred it. And then I filtered it and whatever, and I cut it so that it fits on top of stuff, and it kind of just gives it that reinforcement. I'll go over more about that in the sound design portion. Now these guys, I totally just pilfered these from other projects. I don't even know what project that was. I think I actually do know which one that was. I wasn't going to finish it anyway. But I basically rooted around inside my Slice Beats folder. Boom. For stuff that sounded cool. And I just cut them up and put them in here. Same thing with this thing. I just pitched them up and down, to make them fit the actual song. That's the Serum again. What was this one? I've actually done a lot of how to basses on a lot of these sounds already, and I'm going to go over them again during the sound design portion, but this is another reason why this song didn't take that long, is because a lot of these sounds were already done. Because I do a lot of experiments, and I try to make a lot of songs and a lot of just all kinds of stuff, and they end up not becoming songs, but I do make pretty cool sounds, and they're still there, so I use them and stuff like that. This is also something that I did for Codename Hurricane. If you go back into the channels, you can find it and watch the making of, and I explain how that worked out too. So this bit was kind of interesting for me. This is a level of complication in terms of beat making that is something that I don't really do very often. The actual beat that's present here is pretty much just like, I'm not really great at like the standard kind of drum steppy old school drum and bass beat beyond just the regular like all kinds of like Philly crap and whatever goes on in there. It's not something I'm super great at, but I decided to give it a shot to kind of try to make that stuff work out here. It helped that we had a version of this fill coming in from the original track. I doing here? Oh yeah, I just did some manual cuts just to make it sound more glitchy. And then I also layered in a kick and a snare from the original pattern to kind of glue it all together. This time I filled it with the Serum patch, which by itself sounds like this. So okay, this sound that happened just now, that's actually originally one of the basses from the original track, the VR stems. This is that super vocody sounding one. I reversed it and I stretched the hell out of it, and that's what I ended up using. I may have also put that in a harmor. I don't really remember, but I'll find out later. I think this is, yeah, it's one of the other ones. I love doing these cuts and then like the rises in the chords after the cut. Like that's a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff. And here's the bass coming in with it, and like that's kind of what these guys are, filling in the bass. So this is a big like yeah moment, because like stuff like there's the cut and then the beat comes back, but then there's another sort of like emphasis moment on just the material. It's a very straight, solid. There's not a lot of like modulation. It's just a rise, and that's really all that's happening. And then another cut, and like just doing that over and over again. Like it might feel like it's too complex, but it flows so well. And a lot of that flow, the decision to do that wasn't really mine. This is basically still the arrangement from the original song, only drum stepped up a bit. Hey, this guy. If you listen to the song enough times, you might actually recognize that from bits that happened later as well. I don't remember where I got that from, though. I kind of remember where I got that from. I'm not totally sure. We'll find out later. Gotta do some digging. But I just made the cuts, and like how I do these cuts is I make them, how long they need to be, and then I get the slip edit tool. Like if I just put this guy here, and then I kind of move it around until I find bits that work. Like I don't know that this stuff's gonna work that way it does. Like this is all 100% trial and error. And this part just had I just put some volume automation to kind of accentuate this hit right here. And then I also reversed back out of it. This is literally the same thing that just happened over here. Here. With the fill and all that stuff. I think I may have made some changes in some of the bass modulation, but largely it's the same thing. I think it's still. Yep. Hell is this? Again with that guy. So like, making the fill that worked there, that kick that came in. This is something that's kind of interesting about FL, and presumably you can do this with other DAWs. Like I have patterns, but I'm also changing how the patterns work just by clicking and dragging, cutting and moving around in the playlist. I actually, because I wrote like this kick pattern here, not in a variation on the pattern, but I just put it in there. It's just there. No pattern is doing that. That's just a lot of that sort of duality and arrangement thinking is kind of important. So this is all still stuff that we had from the original break in the intro. This is the big reverby vocal.
Keep your head high, looking at the
Now this part was actually a little hard because I used the hard elements. I used the basses and the vocals and everything, but I didn't have the drums in there, which meant that if I used the hard Maximus, it started to distort. And this is something that's going to be covered more in the mastering stuff. But this automation is me actually turning stuff down so that it doesn't distort. Because I still wanted the hard. Because if I actually did make this the quiet Maximus, it would sound weird when it went into the real Maximus with the drums when they came in.
Keep your head high, looking at the night sky, and now I'm not alone.
You can actually kind of still hear that it does that. And I was okay with that because honestly, it blends in with the actual distortion happening inside the main bass. It just feels a little odd. In fact, if some of that actually is distortion from the main bass, but it's timed well enough with the vocals that it makes it sound like the vocals distorting.
Keep your head high, looking at the night sky, and now I'm not alone at all. So keep your head high, looking at the night sky, and now I'm not alone at all. So keep your head high, looking at the night sky, and now I'm not alone at all.
So let's talk about the progression that I chose to use for this, because the progression that I'm using in the bass is not necessarily the progression that's present in the actual song. In fact, I don't even know what the progression in the song actually is, because what I've done here is something called Re-harmonization, where you have a melody or a lead line of some kind, and you kind of just change what's going on beneath it. In this case, the melody is the vocals, and because it stays kind of tonically, like it stays sort of around just regular scales, I could kind of just throw around whatever minor progression I want, and it'll work out. Which is why over here, it's just both channels in the same pattern, which is why we see those two together. I just kind of throw around different notes, and it still sounds right.
Looking at the night sky, and now I'm not alone at all.
And this is actually just the same break and rise from earlier. I don't think I made any changes whatsoever to this. Nope. Actually, I think I might have changed. Yeah, I changed the X mod from the FM riser, so I think it's a bit differently. It behaves a bit differently.
Now I'm not alone.
Now, this was actually a lot harder than I thought it'd be, and it wasn't something that I was planning on doing initially because I knew it was going to be hard. And this is the expected change to drum and bass from the drum step. And the thing about drum step versus drum and bass is that drum step is not literally just halftime drum and bass. There are different considerations you have to make when you are doing halftime arrangement versus full-time arrangement. And just putting a halftime arrangement in full-time doesn't always work. And I learned this when I was doing Elimination on the Momentum EP, and I ended up having to make a drastically different second drop to make that work. There were some changes I made to make this a little more palatable instead of being too dense, but I also did just leave it being as dense as it is. I liked it being as dense as it is.
Now I'm not alone.
Like this part is one of the changes that I made, is that I kind of left a little bit more room for modulation to be present as opposed to just being as choppy as I was being in the regular drum step drops. Like this bit's still pretty choppy, but it's choppy in the right kind of way that it fits with the beat. It doesn't really interfere with it. And so this part also didn't really interfere with it. Now all this volume automation is because I decided to use the part of the drop chord that had that kind of distorted synth edge. But I didn't really want that to interfere with the bass that I was using. I also didn't want to get rid of it completely, so that's why I didn't just cut it like I had been doing. Again, more relatively simplistic arrangement that wasn't conflicting with the beat as hard as it would have been otherwise. And then I wasn't planning on doing this, but after having done this, I wanted to get the hell out of full time as fast as possible. because it was like, as much as this all makes sense looking at it now, it might make sense looking at it, but as much as it made sense to me, it really was hard. So I kind of wanted to get out of there. Again, here's the reinforcement, the blurred reinforcement that we put in there from earlier. This is more or less the same arrangement-wise as the second half of the first drop. I just switched out the bass, all the bass accents to be new ones. So you remember that part from over here. Even has the same bell hit. Oh, wait, where is it? And then, like, for the rest of these guys, like, I still changed them too. I just came in here and I just moved them around. It's the same sample, but different, you know, modulations and whatever. Keep it fresh. And here was one moment where I decided to stretch the bass kind of just over the hit that was coming after it. And then this is the same as the break rise, the break rise from earlier, only it doesn't rise anymore. It just goes out. I like doing that. That's a big reverb on things, just have a big tail and then it ends up stopping. And that's more or less entirely what happens here. It's very complicated, but just because I decided to make it complicated. The sources of the sounds themselves, some of them are complicated too, but my usage of them in this track really wasn't that complicated. I just put them in the place where they were supposed to go, which sounds like a really cop-out thing to say, but I have to imagine that you kind of got enough out of what I was doing in the arrangement that should make sense to you. Now, this is normally where I'd stop the tutorial, but now because I'm doing this live, I'm going to take questions from the chat. That was a sound. All right, chat, let's give me questions. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. I gotta wait for the delay for people to create the fact that I actually said something. Okay, someone just asked someone in the chat a question. That wasn't me. Okay, I really thought that I got this to you guys the first time. I guess some of you weren't here for that. Ask me questions about this video, about what I just did, like in this track, arrangement and elements. Ask those questions. Don't ask sound design questions, because that's going to be in the next video. Don't ask mixing questions, because that's going to be in the next video. Don't ask questions that don't have anything to do with the song, either. Guide tracks for your arrangement, or you just wing it. Okay, so this guy just asked, he says, do I use guide tracks for the arrangement, or do I just wing it? I wing it, but the winging that I do is based on my experience from pretty much how everyone else does things. You might be thinking, well, that's not very original. Why did you do that? And because the general arrangement of a track being like, you know, intro, break, rise, drop, break, rise, drop, outro, that kind of thing. It's very heavily ingrained in how in Western music anyway, we like to listen to it. And every track has some very small variation on that. And the variations really aren't that large. So sticking to that, you know, especially if you don't really have a giant idea about where to go, starting with that as a kind of a guideline is pretty handy. I don't really need to use a guide track for that, because honestly, they're all going to kind of equalize out to that sort of setup. When you start this remix, do you have an initial idea of what you wanted to do? Just open up the stems and see where your ideas went. I didn't have an idea when I got the stems, but when I did get the stems, I just kind of listened to it. That's when I got the idea to do the liquid drum and bass. Although that was as much an idea about what I thought my fans would find funny as it was something that I thought would actually work for this track. Could you stroke your beard while explaining fills and stuff? So fills work by there's two ways of doing that. You can either know what you want to put in a fill. Like, let's go look at the fill that was actually included in this track, this guy. Like, what made that work? You could probably break it down into why, you know, what beat went where they made it work the way it did. But I could probably guarantee that whoever wrote it, I mean, if actually Virtual Riot wrote that, trial and error goes a long way in fills. Like just kind of putting notes down until it flows right is pretty great. And we are good. Like even if we are not expert arrangers and writers and people who write music, we are really very good at knowing when things don't flow. Because if we listen to something while it's happening and we go, ugh, we can identify pretty quickly what elements are disrupting the flow. So you identify what's disrupting the flow, what beat or whatever is fucking up, and then you move it around until it doesn't. And you just do that enough times, and eventually you have a giant repertoire of fills that you know work for specific elements. How did you deal with keeping the length and pitch of the bass samples? When I play a sample really low, it goes too slow. I played all of the bass samples at their original pitch, except for a couple of them, like this guy. But changing that guy's pitch was pretty easy because it's a relatively simple sample. But like this guy, that's way too complex of a sample. And because it's in regular 44.1, if I pitched it down, I would lose a lot of the high frequencies, and I didn't feel like making it up by adding white noise or distorting it. So I kept all of those at the original pitch. And they're so convoluted and so full of motion that it almost doesn't matter that they're not in whatever pitch the song is in, which I think is F sharp. Beer stroking. When will I release it? It's already released. The contest is over. I didn't win. So I just go to my SoundCloud and download it. It's yours. Let's scroll up and read more questions. If I could change the remix how the composition's over, what part would you change? Okay, so I had this philosophy when it comes to remixes that I actually feel like it should be pretty related to the original content. And I'm not saying that the others weren't, because they were. Like the guy that won the Phase 1 remix was pretty related to the original content, the original track. Although I never heard of the guy Phase 1 before this competition, and I haven't listened to any with other music, but I was not super into the fact that a lot of the bass samples that are in his remix were just the original bass samples. And this is just my own gripe because I am a sound designer at heart and I like making awesome bass sounds, which is why I used none of the original bass samples except for one extremely convoluted change to one that I used. And that's really just a personal opinion. And much like if you remember my Skrillex remix of Bundem, it still sounded like the original track. A lot of people have this idea that a remix is just a completely original song with the vocals on it. And my idea of what a remix is supposed to be is that it's a tribute to the original track. You're doing a version of the track that's more or less the same thing, just with your spin on it. It's not going to be, you're not going to, I don't like the idea of just having a track that could have been its own track. If it weren't for the fact that it shared the name and had the vocals, it would have been a 100% personally original track. That's not what I think a remix is. And I know that other people don't share that idea, and I don't really care if they do or not. That's their own deal. But because that's my deal, I could not have done this remix any other way. This had to, for me to do it, this is what it would have been, and nothing could have, no knowledge of the future would have changed it otherwise. Can you braid your beard while wearing a Viking costume and carry an axe? Well, from experience, I could say yes. Touch your glass and put it back in your nose while expanding the soft synths used. That's the sound design video. That's coming up next. Do you always fade up risers? Well, yes, they rise. You don't have to do that. But actually, sometimes, even in this track, they rise up and then right at the very end, they fall really fast. Like right here. Although it doesn't really sound like it because of the nature of FM, but that's what's happening right there. How do you decide what remix contest to enter? So far, the only remix competitions I've entered are the Skrillex one, the Black Sun Empire one, and this one. I entered the Skrillex one because at the time I was relatively unknown and it was Skrillex and I like Skrillex, so I figured that was a good idea. The Black Sun Empire because it was a Black Sun Empire remix of a Noisia track. So it was a Noisia remix, really. And I was super. I mean, it was a collaboration. I think it might have been a collaboration. And I had to, like, I could not have not done that remix competition. And this one I did. It was really just a super whim. Like, I had no real reason to do this remix competition, but I wanted to anyway. I don't even know if I could have released it, even if I won. Actually, in this I could have. There's a stipulation in my fixed contract. The contract that actually is about that, but it's just I generally don't do remixes. Like, it's not something that I like to do. I prefer doing originals. What sections, if any, did you struggle with the arrangement, and how did you deal with that? I think the most difficulty I had in this track was the drum and bass, the full-time section here. And that was just reconciling the density of edits and crap that I had in the first drop and making that work in a faster tone. And it ended up just being to do less. Less was more in that sense. If it wasn't drum step, what genre would this remix have been? Drum and bass? That's something else that I like doing in actual remixes, is that I don't want to do the same genre. Like, doing a dubstep remix of a dubstep track kind of feels to me like it's just sort of like saying that, like, I could have done this better. And like, it's not about doing it better. It's about doing it differently. And because the original track is already there, it's still there. And considering you are remixing it, we're operating under the assumption that that track was good in the way it was. So it just feels weird for me to do, because when I did the Skrillex remix, that was a dubstep track that I did drum and bass into. And I did the Noisy remix, that was a drum and bass track that I did an electro track to. And then this one was a dubstep track that I did a drum step track for. It was actually closer than what drum and bass would have been. But, yeah. Would you like to make your own remix competition with live reviewers of winners of the prize? Well, when I hit 50K, something like that might happen. During your work on this remix, did you feel any parts were really vibrant enough that you like to take your original content? What? During working on this remix, did you feel any parts were really vibrant enough that you'd like to take it into your original content? Oh, well, oh yeah, okay. So my understanding of that question is that did working with this style of music change my idea of what I would run and write for my own music? And a little. I did really like Virtual Riot's writing. Like, the arrangement and the melody are all really nice. It is a lot of fun, and it does feel very triumphant and epic, and that's a nice feeling. That's kind of cool. I do sort of struggle with that idea, that kind of idea, because I'm really good at, like, I am good at doing epic stuff, but I'm not really good at doing happy epic stuff. I'm really serious-minded kind of when it comes to that angle. Although there was one track that I was already done with it when I started doing this track, but there's one track on my next EP that's a little bit different from that regard. So yeah, I suppose I can assimilate some of his style into my own, because it's pretty great. Yes. All right, so I actually have to go eat dinner now, so I believe I have done this for long enough. That was pretty successful. Lots of information in regards to this track via questions. So that was worthwhile. Once people started asking the correct questions, you can't see the chat, but people were asking me things like, how long have I been producing, and what, mixing questions, all these things. That's why I had to be specific about the kind of questions I wanted to ask. Which, of course, I said at the beginning of this video, but not everyone who's here now was there then. So, yes, that's how time works. Anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.